I am your host, Jason Miles, and this is the podcast. This is our weekly news roundup show. And this show was a little spicier than usual. And I will take 100% of the blame for that. So sometimes when I get a lot of the pre-show production work done and I get the clips done that are going to go up, I have a little bit of time to rest a little. I wake up at like 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, do all this stuff, and I passed out. And if you notice, I'm going to sound a little out of it. I'm going to be real quiet on this show because I was 20 minutes late to get in the show. I totally fell asleep. And some things had changed from what we initially had discussed. And there's a little bit of back and forth. I shouldn't say back and forth. Pascal has a very passionate take on the situation in Russia and Ukraine that originally was not what he was going to discuss. So I was thrown off quite a bit. So besides rushing to get everything, oh no, oh no, oh no! Through a curve. Still an interesting show. Kuba always has very sobering, nuanced analysis on U.S. interventions in the Middle East, and especially in his native land of Eastern Europe. So we have a clip up of a show I was recently a guest on where Kuba came in and gave a very good analysis when the first attack from Russia and Ukraine happened. So we also, for the bonus patrons, have friend of show and Latin American journalist based out of Peru, Camilo Gomez, comes up and gives us the skinny on what's happening in Latin America. We wanted to take a deeper dive, but there was still some spillover from the first hour that you'll hear. If you want to hear that bonus coverage, the only way to do it is become a patron. Patreon.com/Bitter Lake Presents. So here is our news roundup, which is pretty much a conversation between Kuba and Pascal about what's going on between Russia and Ukraine, U.S. and NATO aggression, thank you for taking the time to listen. If you have anything to say, if you disagree with any of the takes, please leave a comment. And I am... evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of This is Revolution Podcast, TIR Crüe News Roundup. I'm your host, Jason Miles, and I do apologize so greatly for the later than usual start. Usually, we're like a couple minutes behind, but today, I apologize for that one. And because we're so far behind, let me just bring everybody in right now. Let me bring in my homie, my co-host, my dog. He is the man of the Mau Mau Hour and my alarm clock. He is the Pascal Robert.
Peace and greetings to the chat. Peace and greetings to the audience. Peace and greetings, Jason Miles. What's up?
Thanks for calling.
You know I wasn't going to do that, right? Because you specifically instructed me, don't ever do that.
Yeah, because usually I'm doing a million things, but this time, not so much. Now let's bring in the man who broke the news while we were sharing a stream with Joe Payne yesterday about what was going on in Russia and the Ukraine. He is everybody's favorite middle manager of the Death Star, Deep State Kuba.
Hello, everyone. I would say peace and greetings, but I think I'll just say greetings because there's no peace.
There's peace somewhere.
Not in Kiev, but we'll handle
Cool,
that.
I just want to warn you, my man. I know that you have the hot subject of the evening. I'm prepared for my subject, but I've been getting all kinds of beef about my position on this subject all day on social media, even from Djene. And I'm hyped up, I'm geeked up, and I'm ready to rock and roll because there'll be a lot of people pissed off, a lot of hurt feelings. And, as much sympathy as I have for humanity, I really don't give a fuck. So,
So as much sympathy as you have for humanity, you don't have sympathy for humanity.
I don't know. I have sympathy for humanity, but I don't have sympathy for people who are upset because I take this. I don't mind you being upset with my position, but being upset because I take that position is what I find a problem with.
You mean your pro-Putin position?
No, I'm not pro-Putin. I'm not pro either party here. I am basically saying that when you have two bulls in a pen, they're going to fight.
Yeah.
I mean, that seems fair. I didn't see whatever skirmish you've got into online.
Yeah.
Did you see that? Did you see that sign he just pointed out? You just guess what, Pascal? Bam. Your house done.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
What, Kuba just, you didn't see the secrets?
That's how we communicate. Right?
Oh my God.
Kuba just sent out a memo to have a drone follow you.
Everything is done. Everything is done.
I'll go off for my afternoon walk tomorrow, and
you about to get black bagged so bad. Either that or Kuba just officially.
Actually, for Pascal, the bag is white.
wow.
And make sure the bag is white. Negricide.
I like your smooth CIA voice. You should do one of those intersectional Latina ads for the CIA. I'm a musician. I'm Jason Miles. I'm a musician. Occasional podcast. African American male. Cisgender. And I'm everyone's least expected CIA plant.
I'm still mad at this. Well, before Kuba sends off any signals to have me eradicated here, and hiding in Baja. Now we know where you are.
Tell Carlos I said hello.
Kuba, I do want to say thank you. Real quick, just to give people an update. I did cut a clip of that last night. I was a guest on Joe Payne and J. Andrew World show last night. Bad Takes. These are bad takes, and it's a movie review show, and they wanted to talk about a movie that I loved. And before we knew it, stuff was jumping off in Russia and Ukraine in the chat, because I was sharing the stream on our channel. Kind of blew up, so I reached out to Kuba super last minute, and even in his undies, he came on and did the damn thing. So I really appreciate that, and also shout out to Derek Varn, who also agreed to come on.
Maybe the issue wasn't that I was in my undies, but like I was wearing the like apron with the blood spatter, right? Like, and it's like, ah, shit, I don't have time to change. It'll have to be audio only.
Like the what's that movie? Not Saw. What's the other movie where the white guys go overseas?
Oh, Hostel.
Yes. That movie scares the shit out of me, because I've definitely been in scary places like that overseas. But Kuba, your news story of the day is going to be kind of an extension on, yes, Gigi, Kuba will be wearing just an apron. That's why he couldn't come on. That's why did you see him look over? He's not wearing pants.
Yeah, that's why I can't go and get my own damn drink.
And I believe the term they used was you were Donald ducking it, which is just a shirt, no pants.
Mm-hmm.
Bing bong to the wind.
And I suppose now that we've hit rock bottom dignity, we can pivot to War and Peace.
Yes. I know you want to get into what is going on right now. Can you kind of give a little context to what's happening, and also then give us your opinion on what you think is going to happen?
So let me start by updating everyone about the status of the fighting in Ukraine. Yesterday, Russian forces entered at the border of Belarus, north of Kiev, through the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics, the breakaway republics that Russia recognized. They also advanced north out of Crimea. They've reached several major cities. Chernigov, which is only 144 kilometers north of Kiev. Kharkov, the second largest city in Ukraine, and the outskirts of Kiev itself. And those are the northern and eastern advances. The southern column from Crimea has met much less resistance and is moving along the coast towards the regional capital of Kherson. There have also been reports of naval landings at Odessa, which is a major port in the southwest of Ukraine. Those I haven't been able to confirm. And this has been the situation since more or less last night. The southern column continues to advance towards Kherson, but the other advances have all reached the outskirts of major cities where they've stalled, and they're engaging in combat with Ukrainian forces. Airstrikes have been continuous against Ukrainian military infrastructure. The first targets were anti-air defenses, as well as military and civilian airfields. It looks like the Ukrainian Air Force has been grounded and disabled. So Russia enjoys air superiority. That's the news out of Russia. The Ukrainians have cast doubt on that, but it doesn't look like there's been any air combat over Ukraine. In addition, they've moved on to hitting military bases and supply depots. One question that on which the longevity of Ukrainian resistance depends is how significant stockpiles they have of munitions, and especially surface-to-air handheld rockets and anti-tank rockets. Those are some of the weapons that NATO has been supplying. We don't know how many they are. They're single use. So, or rather, you use a rocket each time. Stocks are limited. And so one possibility is that the Ukrainian military is quickly overwhelmed. Another is that they run out of supplies. There's the hope of Ukrainian forces is that because of President Zelensky's announcement of full mobilization, martial law, that they'll be able to bog down Russia for a longer period of time until the diplomatic situation changes or the political will to fight in Russia is eroded. But it looks Russia deployed approximately 200,000 troops to the region. They've invaded from multiple sides. They haven't committed more than about 50-60% of the forces that they have ready, so they have ample reserves. And this is a full-scale invasion, as it's been described in the press. Putin describes the Ukrainian government as the Kiev regime. So the target has to be Kiev. His narrative of victory requires that the government of Zelensky fall and that a pro-Russian government or a Russian occupation of Kiev conclude the fighting. And that level of commitment against Ukrainian forces, it's likely a matter of time before Russia manages to make it all the way to the Ukrainian capital. So that's the status as of now. The one question is, why did this war erupt? And with the Western press, you have a single narrative, which is about Putin's megalomania and Russian aggression against the sovereign country, the Russian occupation, the Russian annexation of Crimea, that this is an attempt to recreate the Soviet Union, the territorial ambitions, Russian chauvinism, Russian nationalism, inspiring this move against a vulnerable, defenseless, and innocent neighbor. The reality is more complicated. The Russian counter-narrative that Putin has put forward is that Ukraine is not a real country, that it was a integral territory of Russia, part of the same shared national space. The Ukrainians and Russians are the same people, and it was only hived off administratively because of the political events of the Russian Revolution and the interwar period, where it was just established as an administrative unit within the Soviet Union. Indeed, the Crimea was never part of any Ukraine until the 1960s, when Nikita Khrushchev gifted the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic the Crimea as a part of a grand gesture of fraternal brotherhood among nations. So the Putin position is that Russia is merely reclaiming what's rightfully hers from an illegitimate Kiev regime that is backed by foreign powers hostile to the Russian nation and the Russian people, intent on exploiting it as a security vulnerability to weaken and break Russia. The case that there's a connection between Ukrainian lands and Ukrainian and Russian people. There's something to that. The word Russian comes from the Kievan Rus, which was the first Eastern Slavic state, and it was based in Kiev. That's where the Eastern Slavs converted to Orthodox Christianity. Ukrainian and Russian are mutually intelligible languages, and after the Kievan Rus was broken by Genghis Khan and the Mongol invasions, the lengthy Tatar occupation, Muscovy inherited that role as the central city of the Russophone Russian cultural space, and various czars regathered the Russian lands. Indeed, they took Kiev not from an independent Ukraine, but from the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, the Grand Principality of Lithuania, on a series of border wars in the Middle Ages. For a very long time, Ukraine was a part of Imperial Russia, then, of course, later part of the Soviet Union. Whether this practically means anything is that my position is that the history is interesting, but it's a matter of for Ukrainians and to a lesser extent Russians to decide what their relationship is. And the perspective across Ukraine is quite different. During the Soviet period, only about 2/3 of contemporary Ukraine, excluding Crimea, were under the administration of the USSR. The western third was Polish, was under the administration of the Polish Second Republic. The course of Ukrainian flourishing or non-flourishing was very different in the two parts. Because of the requirements of forced industrialization, Stalin seized agricultural produce, grain, including seed grain, from Ukrainian peasants in large enough numbers to trigger a major famine. And the Ukrainian territory was placed under demographic and political pressure by the movement of ethnic Russians or Russophones into Ukraine from other parts of the Soviet Union, as well as attempts to bring Ukrainians more into a Russian Soviet cultural fold. In the Polish half, the Ukrainian, in the Polish third, the Ukrainian minority was given language rights and strengthened its strengthened a sense of Ukrainian identity, Ukrainian nationhood, and especially to the example, the demonstration effect of the hunger and the repression in Stalinist Soviet Union against Ukrainians, a radicalized anti-Russian sentiment in Western Ukraine. Currently, that's the heartland of the most nationalist, most Russophobic, most intensely Ukrainian-speaking and Ukrainian-identifying population. The areas around Lviv and west of Kiev. That's where Pravny Sektor and other right-wing nationalist groups are at their strongest. The rest of Ukraine, including Kiev, is mixed between people who, there's a Russian minority that speaks Russian and identifies as Russian. There's a Ukrainian linguistic minority that identifies as Ukrainian, and then there's a large plurality or majority of people who identify as Ukrainian but actually speak Russian. Generally speaking, they're all Orthodox or secularized Orthodox, some Jewish people like President Zelensky. And there, the idea of national belonging is ambiguous and fluid. So you have different results depending on when you ask people in the different regions and how you phrase the question. In places like Odessa, which was never a Ukrainian city, when the Ukrainians were a majority in the countryside in that region, the Tatar-Mongol presence in Crimea made it more or less uninhabitable. So Odessa, the city, was founded by the Russian Empire and settled mostly with Russophone ethnic Russians and other people from the empire. It was a huge Jewish center before World War II. There, as well as the eastern areas around the Donbass, the areas just north of Crimea, and the center around Kiev, areas further north, the population is likely to be reconcilable. They might not be happy about Russian administration, but they speak the language, they have personal connections. Most Ukrainians are at least part Russian, mixed families. So in those areas, a Putin-backed administration or Russian occupation might be tolerated and then given an opportunity to succeed or fail on its merits. Western Ukraine is the region that's the most dangerous if Russian forces step into it. It's a little like the difference between the UK and Scotland, where not everybody loves the English, but generally speaking, for hundreds of years, their membership in the United Kingdom was not a problem, versus the UK and Ireland, where, of course, it was much, much, much more repressive on the part of the English, with much fiercer resistance on the part of the Irish. There's a super chat question. To what extent does the success of Ukrainian democracy, would the success of Ukrainian democracy represent a threat to Putin, and is that why he's taking steps to snuff it out? Well, let me put it this way. It is an entirely hypothetical question, because Ukrainian democracy has never succeeded. There is an electoral system in Ukraine, and there's also one in Russia. The elections are shady, probably not fraudulent, but the biggest threat to Ukrainian democracy prior to this invasion was actually the Maidan protests, the Euromaidan protests in 2013, 2014, which brought down the elected, constitutionally sound government of Viktor Yanukovych, which was pro-Russian, and installed a American-backed nationalist government ahead of elections that brought in the oligarch Poroshenko. So if anybody was sabotaging Ukrainian democracy in 2013, 2014, it was Victoria Nuland and the US State Department, like the connivance of the EU. So
that's very important.
When it comes to, and so that's the deep history. And when it comes to questions of legitimacy in international law, well, there was an agreement signed in, I believe, 1996, the Budapest or Bucharest Accord, where the United States, NATO powers, and Russia all agreed to respect the sovereignty and territorial integrity of post-Soviet successor states in exchange for them handing over their nuclear weapons stockpiles that they inherited from the Soviet Union. So, in theory, the invasion, forget what's happening now, but the seizure of Crimea would represent a Russian violation of the Budapest Agreement. However, the Russians counter that the Maidan uprising, and before that, the Orange Revolution, which was again against Yanukovych, again a contested election, and he was replaced through protest rather than legal means with a pro-American government. that those are violations of Ukrainian sovereignty, so the agreement is void. Russia can't be held to it because the United States and NATO refused to honor it. There was, after 2014, there was a peace deal, a peace process laid out in the Minsk Accords in order to handle the seizure of Crimea and secessionist republics in Donetsk and Lugansk. And the Russians are accused of violating that by cooperating with the separatists, by annexing Crimea, et cetera. The Russians countered that part of the Minsk agreement included commitments by the Ukrainian government to federalize and have greater recognition for Russian minorities and address Russian security concerns. But they didn't do any of that. So again, the Russian perspective is this agreement doesn't bind us because the other side, the Ukrainian government, violated it. So we had for 4 years, 5 years, this or longer, this lengthy standoff. And it was pointed out that it starts under Obama. Under Trump, you have a lengthy fallow period, and then with Biden, you have a resumption of outright aggression. I guess we moved from Donetsk, don't tell, to, let her rip. And the one reason for that, and partisans of Donald Trump argue that it was his brilliant diplomacy or his undeniable masculine authority that kept Putin in line. The reality is different. Putin was simply preparing. This has been a long time coming for the Russian side. Putin is, I would not call him a megalomaniac, but he does have a great power project for Russia, one which he believes is intrinsically linked to Russian security. That is to push NATO as far away as possible, restore Russian military strength, because Western powers only respect force, and regain as much territory as possible to restore the Russian homeland. Okay. Under Trump, I think it was a good opportunity for him to build forces and plan, but also there was the possibility that he might just be able to talk Trump into giving him the whole thing, which would satisfy his goals and be a much more amenable path to taking those Ukrainian territories. Once Trump was gone and he was dealing with the Russian blob, the Federal Foreign Service Defense Establishment, which is fiercely Atlanticist, pro-NATO, expansionist when it comes to NATO institutions, then a hope of achieving his goals through diplomacy failed. And this moment where a weak president with COVID still hamstringing America, the shameful response to COVID, demonstrating weakness within the American government, the American state apparatus. Like these people can't handle COVID. How could they handle Putin? This was an opportune moment, and he took it. So I have another. Let me just address the super chats, and then I'll hand it over to Pascal. When does the ground thaw over there, and does that present a significant logistical mobility problem? The ground thaws around April, and yes, it turns into mud, and heavy vehicles have a great deal of difficulty passing over the terrain. Also, right now, a lot of rivers are frozen, so you can cross over on the ice. You won't be able to do that once the thaws start. Russian logistics is based heavily on road and especially rail transport, and the Ukrainian infrastructure matches. It's all post-Soviet, so it matches completely with Russian technology and Russian equipment, so that you have a very strong logistical chain as long as the rail system is intact. How much of the Russophone population is a result of Stalin era migration? The Donbass, probably 80%. Central Ukraine, probably between a third and half. Crimea was Tatar before World War II, but Stalin considered the Crimean Tatars an unreliable minority, so they were deported en masse. Many of them died, not all of them returned after the war. So the Crimea also had a serious demographic change. And I've been like Pascal has been quiet for so long that I'm going to wrap up and let him say his piece.
I'm saying more than a piece. All right. I'd like to thank former Defense Department Kuba employee for the Defense Department narrative. Everything Cuba said was fine. It was all belied by the first thing he said in 5 minutes. Ukraine weapons they got from NATO. Number one, if the United States had Mexico with weapons sent by China or Russia in the hands of Mexico, how would the United States respond?
Would that response then be justified?
Yes.
The response would be justified then?
It would be to neutralize a neighboring country.
But the response would be justified.
That sides with an enemy that is armed you.
But the response would be justified.
Yes. It would be justified for them to neutralize an enemy arming them in a neighboring country.
So you're all about the Monroe Doctrine then?
It's not about the Monroe Doctrine. It's like,
what's it about?
I have my house. Okay, you have a house.
You don't have a house. A nation state is not a house.
No. Okay, listen. I have a nation state.
Look, for the record, I didn't take a position.
You spoke. I'm not finished. You have a nation state. You have to protect the integrity of the nation state. You have another nation state that you would normally peaceful with, who is being armed by someone who is your enemy, and who, by the way, that enemy is trying to undermine your integrity. Do you have the right to take some action, yes or no?
Are you asking?
Do you have, yes or no? Do you have the right to take some action?
I don't think right has anything to do with it.
Yeah, this is not about right.
Okay. Should that nation state take some action, yes or no?
I mean, it depends.
Weapons from an enemy that is trying to undermine your integrity, that threat. I didn't say military action. Should they take some action, yes or no?
Look, there's many different responses that are possible, and I'm not here to judge Putin, and I'm not here to say that the Russian invasion.
You just called him a megalomaniac.
Well,
what do you think he is? Well, time out. What do you think he is? Is he a great guy?
He's a man who's in power.
Is he a great guy? Is he a great guy? Is he a great guy?
He's no more worse than George Bush or any of the president we've had. First of all, everyone talk for a while. I haven't talked yet. Let me make my presentation.
So, nigga, you got a whole show where you talk. You talk a lot.
Oh, well, hold on. We made this clear. Kuba made this point. Let me make my point. All you have to do is listen to what the United States ambassador to the Soviet Union under Reagan and Bush, he's no Russian puppet, on Democracy Now!, who was in the box, was asked, what is the cause of the current crisis in Ukraine and Russia? The whole show, he said, U.S. expansionism in NATO on the borders of Russia that we've been doing since the fall of the Soviet Union, and we never tried to include the Russians in the NATO agreements. All we tried to do was include the countries that fell from the Soviet Union and arm them to undermine the sovereignty of the Russians, and this has been going on since the time of the fall of the Soviet Union.
Yeah, I mean,
U.S. ambassador from the United States under Reagan.
No, the fact that NATO expansion was triggered the Russian security threats that have led to this moment. Of course, it was handled in a terrible way, and when I say terrible, I don't mean morally terrible. I mean, if you're going to expand NATO, then make it work. If you aren't going to invest in making and actually achieving your security goals, then don't do this extremely provocative. Don't pursue this extremely provocative policy. And it's been catastrophic, not just for Ukraine and not just bad for Russia, but it's bad for Europe. It's bad for everyone. And it was a terrible, terrible policy.
Let's put this in proper context. You have two countries who have been sworn enemies for the majority of about half of the 20th century. Sworn enemies. I mean, bloodlust. One of them collapses. We don't need to go into how. And says, we are willing to live in peace with you on terms that are mutual, that we can agree on. We do not seek to be a threat anymore. Let us be in peace. The other opponent says, no problem, we can be in peace. The other opponent has an alliance with its allies. One opponent or that fell had an alliance too. It's basically worthless at this time. The opponent who is seeing this beseeching country come to it says, yes, we can make peace, but militarily and geostrategically expands into the countries that fell away from the countries that came beseeching, and not only tries to get them to side with the sworn enemy of the country that came beseeching, but to arm them, militarily empower them. And when it had the ability to include the country that came beseeching, it intentionally excluded them and continued that process until today.
Yeah, are we going
to act like that's insignificant to the context of this history?
Well, you've laid it out, and I think that, and I certainly haven't made. I certainly hope that I don't come across making it sound like this is all Putin's megalomania. That's the narrative that you get in the New York Times and in CNN. Yeah, but Putin, I think that Russia has very legitimate security concerns.
Putin, you're a very brilliant brother. You're a good brother. You had half hour talking about this narrative. You didn't mention this once.
I've been doing shit. Yesterday I mentioned it. I mentioned it on with Doug Lane. I knew that you would bring it up if I didn't, and there was a lot of background. I filled up that half an hour. I could have gone another half an hour, but you weren't going to be talking about the differences between Ukrainian and Russian Slavs, so I figured I'd leave the NATO for you.
Okay, well, that was a strategic point on your part. That's fine, no problem. But for me, that's the most important point. And in terms of the sovereignty of Ukraine, and by the way, I'm glad that you announced that point. Russia did not have much problem with the sovereignty of Ukraine until the United States sponsored a coup in 2014 and put in a government that was siding with fascists against the Russians.
Absolutely. Putin had no problem when Ukraine was independent and had just the standard shitty post-Soviet oligarch leaders that were listening to Moscow and were amenable to working on Putin's terms. And that's how you do diplomacy, right?
By the way, you also mentioned that government was pretty much the best you're going to get in Ukrainian elections in terms of they were moderately legitimate.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't by the rules of Ukrainian democracy. Yanukovych was the legitimate president. You don't have to like it, but he was constitutional, and he was overthrown by a violent mob. And
with a U.S.-supported violent mob who was siding with fascists, and Russia and that government and that country have been in a hot, cold war from 2014 to today.
Yes, yeah, that's all true. And
So what people fail to realize is that Russia is not just invading a country that was doing nothing. Russia has been at war with Ukraine since 2014. No one's telling you that. That's a fact. And Russia has been at war with Ukraine since 2014 because the United States sponsored a coup in Ukraine and put in a fascist-leaning government.
Yeah, I mean, I thought I said that, but
No, you didn't. I like to emphasize a little bit. You mentioned it.
He just wants to talk like this because people get all fired up and then it gets.
No, I want to clarify the position. I want to clarify the position.
The Ukrainian government under Zelensky, incidentally, he's Jewish. So,
and he still uses. And by the way, there's an article right now talking about how his Secretary of Defense is a fascist. He uses the muscle in Ukraine are the fascists. He uses the muscle.
Yes,
exactly.
Yes. Yeah. Well, not only that, but they have a gun to his head. And is that literal? But if there's nothing great about the Ukrainian state, there's also nothing great about the Russian state.
I don't disagree with that.
And this is a contest of imperialism. Will you be in the NATO sphere or will you be in the Russian sphere? And so I don't think that there's a righteous position to take. There's no point demonizing either side, right? I think that Russia has very legitimate security concerns, and it's tragic that we've gotten to this point, but I'm not going to moralize the Russian decision to invade. This is how international politics is done.
I respect that. I appreciate that, Kuba. I appreciate that because I'm not trying to moralize the Russian decision to invade. That's not my goal. No, I'm not. No, what I'm trying to do is give people geostrategic balance, which you never get in the West. You never get in the West. Because everyone thinks that when you tell the truth sometimes that you have to be a tanky when you say America's bad. Well, guess what? America is fucking bad. A lot of other places are bad too, but America is really bad.
Name 7 places that are bad.
Russia is bad.
You're asking me.
France is bad. Germany's
I'm
bad.
asking Pascal. I
France is bad. Germany's bad. Britain's bad.
Was just defending themselves. Are they bad or defending?
How about North Korea?
North Korea is bad too. Shit. China's bad in a lot of things too.
Yeah. So there's a super chat that's asking about the difference between morality and realpolitik, and basically realpolitik stems from a sort of Hobbesian reevaluation of international relations away from Christian moral categories of virtue, right, divine will, towards the pragmatic question of national survival and the accumulation of power. The 18th and through the 20th centuries, you have a remoralization of international relations through the various ideological strains after the French Revolution: human rights, democracy, popular sovereignty, and where policies that favored human rights or democracy or popular sovereignty were good, those that inhibited them, or regimes that failed to live up to them were bad. And this goes through to World War II, which seemed to validate a lot of the moralism of the human rights, democracy side, the liberal idealist side. And then the Soviet Union picks up the dirt in the liberal imagination of totalitarianism from the whole Hitler equals Stalin equation, the evil empire equation. And it's evil when the other guy does it. When you do it, it's just tragic realpolitik. And one observation that I like to make is a Russian crime usually kills a lot less people than an American mistake, right? When you think about the seizure of Crimea, or even potentially this invasion of Ukraine, and you look at the amount of human suffering and devastation that it causes compared to the American invasion of Iraq, like, I think the Russian crime will end up actually being a lot lighter than the tragic American mistake. So this is one reason why I don't like to inject morality into international politics, because it's an excellent alibi for extraordinarily destructive, extraordinarily incompetent apparatchiks that just follow a script that was laid out in Washington. They can always say that we had the right intentions and you can't judge us for it. And you can always blame the other guy, right? Putin's bad, so he's doing evil things. But the universe of selections is not everyone is happy and gets a pony versus the Fourth Reich. It's scenarios that could actually come into existence, that could actually come to pass. That's what leaders are choosing from, and that's what they're shaping. One of the worst things that I think the West does is it sets up schemes and plans and visions that are impossible, therefore destined to fail. And since they're not achievable, there's going to be that fallout. For instance, in 2014, one of the main motivations for the protesters, there were the fascists, there were Ukrainian nationalists, there were anti-Russians, but there were also people who just wanted to get in the EU, because there was that possibility that Yanukovych turned down. The EU invited the Ukraine to open accession talks. Yanukovych said, no, we're going to go with the Russian deal. That's what got the difference, right? That's what got enough popular, local, genuine mobilization in Maidan to push them over the top. And it was a lie. The Europeans never made good on it. And like with the other post-Soviet countries, NATO expansion, which is something that the West likes much more than EU expansion, because NATO expansion is cheap and it gives them security benefits and it looks good. They get, the EU is off the table. We're bringing in NATO. We're showering you with weapons. We're going to, all you have to do is stand up to Putin. And that is also the primrose path to destruction. So if more international policy were honestly presented with real and actual alternatives for leaders and for publics to choose from, and we moved away from moralizing and we moved away from fantasies, then we'd have a much more responsible conversation and a much less bloody earth.
Thank you, Kuba. So I was not finished. Thank you. But there was a great comment. There was a great comment that someone said, quoting Djene, which is ironic because I was shocked that Djene said this, because he's been fighting me all day on my position of this. I wish Jason could get that back up. But the quote was basically saying something like, being angry at Russia for responding in a way that we would expect the United States to respond without getting angry, or that we would support, is kind of like reverse American exceptionalism. That's a great quote. We're basically right now, we are getting angry at Russia for doing everything everyone would expect the United States to do in the same situation, except because we're all Americans and America is the richest country with the McDonald's and the great movies and the nice music that we like. We think it's cool if America does it because the Russians eat that borscht and have bad sausages, and the cold, ugly guys who sponsored the Soviet Union, we hate them, and Putin is the evil demon. Putin ain't no more evil than George W. Bush I, who was a CIA agent as well. They're all evil. The point that I'm trying to say is that the idea of trying to paint Putin as some kind of crazy megalomaniac with empire ambitions, Putin's ambition is to maintain the integrity of the Russian nation state, and perhaps in an effort to neutralize the encroachments of NATO, regain the territorial assets that have been threatened by NATO, and protect his integrity, and perhaps create a greater Mother Russia. I don't deny that's possible. But I'm saying that that's not simply based on, we want the Russian Empire. It's based on, no, you Westerners and America, you Yankees and you NATO Europeans have been screwing us for 30 years with this NATO expansion. And we came to you nice after we fell apart, and you've been jacking us up ever since. And now we're not playing nice anymore.
Sure.
Does Putin have any puppet governments around him that Russia has propped up?
I mean, I think he's surrounded by them.
Transnistria, Abkhazia.
There's tons of them.
And the thing is, too, look,
Putin's not a nice guy. First of all, let me tell you, and let me puncture the fascination with leftists with Putin. Putin hates the Soviet Union. He hates Lenin. He hates Stalin. He probably hates Trotsky. All right? He's an anti-communist. All right?
He hates Yakov Sverdlov.
All right?
The comedian?
There's nothing left.
Smirnov.
There's nothing left about Vladimir Putin. As a matter of fact, Vladimir Putin is an example of someone Stalin would have killed. He's a hardcore Russian nationalist.
No, he's somebody that Stalin may have put in charge of the NKVD.
Well, before he turned. But in terms of actual politics, Stalin would have taken him out because he realized that shit was dangerous. The problem is, what Putin likes is Tsarist Russian Empire. When we had Ukraine, when we had Poland, when we had all those countries.
Well, I thought he was protecting
everything was beautiful
himself. Does he Stalinist? Does he want to
now you're
Empire?
calling him a megalomaniac.
But the thing is, I'm not calling him a megalomaniac. I'm telling you, but the reason why is not because we want Poland, we want Ukraine. We want Poland, we want Ukraine because France, Britain, the United States have been sticking bombs, weapons, missiles, and undermining us in those countries for 30 fucking years.
So, one thing that I'd like to include before we go, because I think that it's important looking forward. I agree with Pascal that there are legitimate security concerns, legitimate security interests for Russia and Ukraine. And I think the best case scenario, given that the fighting has already started, is that it ends quickly. And the fastest ways for that to happen is either a Russian victory or a Ukrainian capitulation. And probably one of those two events is inevitable. So let's just get it over with. And Putin can install a pro-Russian regime in Ukraine, he can annex territory, he'll establish whatever settlement he does. In the territories of Western Ukraine, however, where you have a hostile population, which is not part of this traditional Eastern Slavic narrative, and is not particularly valuable economically or strategically. If he steps in to occupy that terrain, which he could just hive off either as an autonomous region within a Ukraine that's pro-Russian or as its own independent country that's like weak and seething and marginal. If he leaves them alone, then he'll have satisfied the security interests in a quick and dirty but most humane possible way for him to get everything he wants. If he's willing to step into those territories and occupy them, that will require an extremely high level of repression because these are the Russophobic Ukrainians. It will require a lot of violence. It will make Russian soldiers subject to insurgency. And it's the only thing he'll gain is a few hundred miles of strategic depth. That, for me, is a dangerous move because that justification, right? Who cares about these Ukrainians? They're Nazis. They're not all of them are Nazis, right? But even if you don't like the Ukrainians at all, why would you subject the people to a very harsh occupation and your own people to the brutalizing effects of being that kind of occupier, as well as putting an insurgent target on their back, only for 100 miles of strategic depth? And if he stops short of that, then I'm being accused of being pro-imperialist in the chat, and I gotta say I don't like it. I'd be fine with that outcome. That's probably the best outcome. It's much better than an American intervention. It's much better than foreign powers expanding the war or supplying weapons and encouraging an insurgency in the rest of Ukraine to draw this out and kill as many Slavic people as possible. Those are all terrible. And as long as Putin agrees and doesn't step into the trap of Western Ukraine, doesn't insist on claiming territory that he knows will require a bloodbath, then I think that's the best we can hope for.
Let's make this clear. A couple of the agreements that Kuba talked about, and I'm glad you mentioned the Minsk agreements, the earlier agreements. Part of those agreements wasn't Russia was saying, okay, we'll be nice. Because Russia was like, yeah, we'll be nice. What caused the beef with those agreements is that in all of them was a clear demand on the part of the Russians. There cannot be NATO military expansion in territory X, Y, and Z. And every single one of those agreements were breached on those terms.
You're conflating two. Minsk and the Budapest Accord did not have the NATO
Budapest
clauses.
didn't have that. Excuse me. The Minsk Accord had those requirements.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think Minsk meant that did spell out that foreign forces weren't supposed to be interfering in Ukrainian defense. And I said straight up that the Ukrainians had violated those clauses.
Now, I mean, again, Putin didn't have any problem with Ukraine before this coup in 2014, sponsored by the U.S., with this hostile government that, this is the key, Russia has been at war with since 2014. No one is telling you that.
Yes, absolutely. And one of the ways in which you get these liberal narratives that always make Putin a demon or always vilify the other side is that they choose the starting point, right? And the history starts when it's convenient to make that case. So this invasion, began yesterday, right? According to CNN, according to the New York Times, and it was unprovoked, it came out of the blue. If you roll back the tape to 2014, it's a completely different story, but they don't do that. They don't give you that context.
Exactly. And my only purpose here is to give the context that mainstream media and a lot of leftists who are stuck with their anger, fetish, hatred of the Soviet Union won't tell you.
Oh, also, the Russians took Chernobyl.
Oh, okay. Well,
it's one of the Russian part of the Russian narrative justifying the conflict is that apparently Ukraine has been threatening to develop nuclear weapons. And I think that the seizure of Chernobyl, which you kind of didn't have to do because it doesn't have much strategic value and it's dangerous for your soldiers, but I think it has to do with cutting off any radioactive material, any fissile material, any and symbolically sort of putting a stake through the idea of Ukrainian nukes.
Someone made a very good point. I think that this is going to cause NATO expansion in Eastern Europe. And I think that's very likely. But why? Why? Because no one knows the actual truth of how we got here in the first place. And the narrative, as Kuba said, is that Russia bad, Putin evil, Putin megalomaniac.
Here's the thing, right? Like the Ukrainian democracy is not worth defending. It's not a good example. Any Applebaum is just wrong on the merits, right? It doesn't make Russians pine for, that westward dream. But Estonian democracy, Czech democracy, even flawed as it is, Polish democracy, those countries got to join the EU. Life is better there. There's been economic growth. And those smaller countries, I feel like somebody needs to step to speak for them. They also have an interest in their own survival, right? They also have legitimate security concerns. And if you aren't looking at it from a systemic great power perspective, but from the perspective of a small country just trying to survive, yeah, absolutely, better to be inside NATO than not, because otherwise the Russians could gobble you up. And the NATO is basically just filling in bits of the Balkans at this point.
Well, not only that, NATO brings the European and Western fatback and biscuits of capitalism that's going to flow into your country as well. I mean, there's going to be perks that come along with that. And the thing is, though,
well, the EU
I get
certainly.
it. What'd you say?
The EU certainly. I mean, the fact that you could just move to London, well, not London anymore, but Paris or Berlin,
I mean,
it's huge.
But you know, there's definitely, it's not a long pivot from the EU to joining NATO. I mean, the larger point is there's a lot of perks that come with joining the forces that are antagonistic to Russia. But again, my position is that I'm not a fan of Putin or Russia. I'm not a fan of the United States or American empire either. But I do realize that there are certain distinctions that make the military trajectory of American empire a bit more noxious in terms of its actual implementation in the global sphere. Not that Russia is a ball of candy either. So my position here is that bring balance to the actual narrative as to why, and understand that there is a logical reason why Putin does this. He's invading a country he's been at war with since 2014. That literally the United States in the last week has been sending military supplies around to assist. But again, no one's going to tell you that. So, do I support Putin? No, I don't support Putin. Is what he did logical realpolitik? Of course it is. I would challenge any man who's been a leader of a country would have done the same damn thing.
Well, it all depends on your starting point, and if like you just the same as with the liberal narratives. If you start the tape, a week ago, and you're inhabiting that space, then yeah, maybe Putin has no other options. But Putin has been in power for 23 years. He potentially could have engineered something different, but it doesn't matter. We are where we are, and I just hope that the hostilities can conclude as quickly as possible. That Europeans are not shitty towards Ukrainian refugees.
People suffer. I don't want to see Ukrainian people die. I don't want to see anyone suffer or die. I wish that the United States, when the Soviet Union fell, included Russia into NATO, and we wouldn't be in this problem.
Honestly, there was no reason for NATO to persist. As long as you were willing to,
you even went farther than
the UN Security Council.
From Kuba himself, there was no reason for NATO to even persist after the fall of the Soviet Union.
As long as there was a successor forum or organization to handle global security, and in theory, the UN Security Council should do that. That's what should have happened.
And they should have included the Russians.
Russia has a permanent seat. They have a veto. You can't include the Russians more than that.
That's right. That's a good point. That's a good point.
Well, yeah, the Chinese too.
Kuba went even farther than I do. He's like, after the fall of the Soviet Union, NATO should have been disparito, gone.
Yeah, and instead the EU as a peaceful economic bloc and a political bloc, without the Americans meddling in Europe, that could have expanded eastwards and eventually included Russia, right?
But instead
that would have been, but that's the better world that we don't get.
Yep. Well, Kuba was even more radical than I was in his analysis in that way.
I'd like to surprise you.
You think you're the most radical person?
No. I've never made that statement.
Because
I'm definitely, you're gonna say something.
Just kidding.
That I get emails from who thinks my politics are conservative or soft.
It's because you don't have your pronouns in your Twitter.
Yeah. No. It ain't those folks. Believe me.
Definitely.
It's some folks who is, I don't want. Anyway, I'm not gonna go there. I'm not gonna.
The real reason. I did. Did I tell you guys that I had to take the Adolf Reed video down?
Why? Oh, you said I got the email.
Okay. So
is it going to go back up?
No.
Is that ever going back up?
I can try, but there will be a blank spot in it.
Did he request that it be taken down?
He asked nicely.
Oh my!
The audio only will be up tomorrow.
Oh my dude!
I mean, he sent us the thing.
I saw.
We won't say it on air to bring more attention to it, but he is going on Jared Ball's show apparently.
Oh, word?
Yes. Being totally serious.
Bro, we got to take down the whole video. We can't fix that little problem.
I mean, I could try, but it's gonna just shut off, and then I'm gonna get bombarded with a bunch of questions.
So all of those views are erased already?
No. I mean, they don't go away. It's just the video's private.
Well, see if you can do what you have to do to fix the problem.
I could try. But again, it'll be blank for a minute.
Maybe this is some champagne room conversation.
This could be some champagne room.
We can't even do it in the champagne room.
Top talk.
Yeah, this is some off air.
Yeah, the chat is beginning to ask questions.
I do want to say in the champagne room, we will be joined by good friend of show, Camilo Gomez, to talk about the goings on in Latin America. And there is quite a bit going on in Latin America. Pedro Castillo is making concessions with the opposition party. Did you know that? And more. And we will be taking your calls in the champagne room as well. Are you guys ready for some calls?
Oh, I'm always ready.
I mean,
this show phones anyway.
The show originally was going to be very different today. I was expecting a very different show, and then Pascal put on the purple shirt and wanted to fucking grimace everybody on here, and then started yelling. Unacceptable. Unacceptable. From now on, purple shirt, not going to happen. No more purple shirts.
Pascal brought consensus and peace.
No more purple shirts.
I brought peace and consensus.
Purple?
To the show.
I mean, we got around to it. But, you know, like there was a period where I thought I was going to get purged.
No, that wasn't going to happen.
Just got mad. You know why? It's the purple shirt. Every time you wear the purple shirt, this shit happens.
We came to peace and consensus in the end.
Yeah, well, because we had to fucking get the demon out of your purple shirt.
No demons allowed.
Oh, if I see the purple shirt again, I will not go on air until a different one is put on.
No, here we go.
I don't care if you got to get
just red. Turn on a filter over Pascal's screen.
Thank you, guys. We will be, again, taking your phone calls right away for the bonus champagne room. You guys can ask Kuba and Pascal more questions about what's going on with Russia and the Ukraine. Pascal had a whole different thing he was going to cover today, which I'm actually very upset that you didn't cover that because I really wanted him to get in the weeds. And I thought
we might do a Mau on it. That might be the next Mau.
I'm very upset. I was waiting for you to
let's do a whole Mau on that.
We can, but I'm sad
because by the time we do the next Mau, the actual nomination process might have kicked off.
Okay, that actually makes more sense. Okay, well, thank you guys so much for joining us again. Sorry for the delay in getting started. I would love to say it won't happen again, but then I'd be lying.
Check out the Mau. I'm getting great comments on yesterday's Mau Hour. A lot of people like that one.
That you are getting good comments. And the audio only for the Mau Hour will be up Sunday.
I'm a little disappointed about the Adolf Reed show.
I'm not happy about it either. I was very close to being like, Shady's out of the bottle. Can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. But that's just not funny. All right. And on that note, we are out.